It was a starless night, and the desert remained in absolute silence, as if history itself were holding its breath. The wind whispered through the dunes, carrying ancient secrets buried for millennia under the dust of time. At the heart of this emptiness echoed a promise made to a solitary man beneath the starlit sky. In you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. But who exactly were these families? How many of them have been forgotten? And why does no one talk about them today? In this video, you'll discover that behind the name of Abraham, known as the father of a great nation, lies a much larger narrative, one involving entire peoples, forgotten empires, and bloodlines that, though hidden in the shadows, changed the course of the world. Abraham, a name that echoes through three major religions. The man who left the land of Ur in pursuit of a divine promise. But what happens when we look beyond the most well-known names, like Isaac and Ishmael, when we dig into the often ignored details of biblical genealogies and trace the footsteps of those history chose to overlook? In this video, we're going to open a portal to the past and walk forgotten paths that uncover one of Scripture's greatest mysteries, the lost descendants of Abraham, and how they influence civilizations, wars, alliances, and even modern-day conflicts. Most people know Abraham only as the patriarch of Israel, the father of Isaac. Others recognize Ishmael as the ancestor of the Arab peoples. But what about the children of Keturah and the grandchildren who spread across deserts and mountains, building kingdoms and cultures? Do we truly grasp the depth of that divine promise? Father of many nations wasn't just a beautiful title, it was a prophecy that would shape centuries of human history. And that's exactly where our investigation begins. Get ready to meet characters who vanished from pulpits and Bible movies, entire nations who carry Abraham's blood in their veins, yet were silenced by time. Some became allies of Israel, others enemies. Many shaped empires, religions, and events that still echo today. They didn't disappear, they were simply forgotten. But today, we will bring them back into the light. We will uncover the forgotten names, the surprising connections, the hidden clues buried between the lines of the Bible, archaeology, and ancient history. What you're about to see isn't just a lesson, it's a cinematic journey, a passage through ancient maps, buried manuscripts, and ruins that still speak. You'll see how the sons of Keturah connect to African civilizations, how Ishmael's descendants formed powerful tribes that defied empires, and how Abraham's grandchildren and great-grandchildren scattered like sparks in the wind, igniting flames in places you'd never imagine. This video goes far beyond genealogy. It will show you that the promise made to one man truly changed the world, even in the details most have overlooked. And that's why I invite you to watch until the end, because every minute of this story will reveal a new layer of what was forgotten. Do we really know all the children of Abraham, or are we merely scratching the surface of a mystery far deeper than we imagined? The answer may lie in names you've never heard, but that are right there, waiting to be rediscovered. If you love diving into the hidden stories of the Bible, uncovering the mysteries that have shaped both faith and history, then this video was made for you. Like it, subscribe to the channel, and share this content with anyone who also wants to see beyond the obvious. Because today, we remember the forgotten, and we understand that when God makes a promise, He always fulfills it and goes far beyond what we can imagine. The promise wasn't whispered, it was declared with divine authority. When God looked at Abraham and said, "In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed," He wasn't speaking of just one people. He was pointing toward a future far greater than any man's eyes could ever see. In Genesis 17, God didn't just change Abram's name to Abraham. He sealed an eternal covenant. "Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations." Many, not one, not two, many. That word echoes like a riddle, challenging our understanding. After all, who are these nations? Where are these children? And why do we so rarely speak of them? The story of Abraham is usually told with a focus on two names, Isaac, the son of promise, and Ishmael, the son of the flesh. But this simplistic division ignores the vastness of God's divine plan, because beyond family disputes and spiritual struggles, there was a greater project unfolding, a project of multiplication. When God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, he didn't limit that inheritance to a single lineage. On the contrary, he was initiating an expansion that would unfold in unimaginable directions. And to understand the true impact of that promise, we must look at every branch that sprouted from that tree. Isaac was the heir to the spiritual covenant. Ishmael, the firstborn, became the father of 12 princes. But the story doesn't end there. After Sarah's death, Abraham married again, and that changed everything. The woman named Keturah gave him 6 more sons, 6 new branches, 6 new seeds that would spread across the deserts and valleys of history. And within the silence of these lesser-known names lies a mystery, because each one of them gave rise to peoples, tribes, and kingdoms that directly interacted with the biblical narrative and, by extension, with the world itself. This multiplication wasn't merely biological. It was geopolitical, cultural, and spiritual. The nations that arose from Abraham's children influenced wars, formed alliances, and founded civilizations. Some became instruments of judgment, others arms of assistance, and many, though overlooked, carry in their blood the echo of the promise made under the stars. You shall be the father of many nations. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a destiny, a real legacy. And the most striking part is realizing that this inheritance isn't confined to the past. It shaped the present and still echoes in our world today. When we look at the Middle East, the northern African tribes, the ancient records of the Arabian Peninsula, we realize that the promise made to Abraham crossed borders and centuries. It seeped into dynasties, connected with empires, and left its mark on cultures that often don't even know where they came from. The Bible gives us clues. Archaeology confirms it, genealogy deepens it, and the result is clear. Abraham was more than just the father of Israel. He was the beginning of a human, spiritual, and historical revolution. This realization changes everything, because it invites us to rethink what we've come to define as chosen people. It shows us that God doesn't operate within human-made boxes, that His promise goes far beyond our limited comprehension. And it forces us to ask one essential question. If God fulfilled something so vast with Abraham, what else might He be doing right now, right before our eyes, even if we don't see it? The truth is, when God makes a promise, He always goes further. He always surpasses logic, boundaries, and expectations. Abraham looked up at the sky and saw stars. God saw entire nations emerging from his sons. He saw empires. He saw hidden lineages. He saw an eternal plan unfolding across generations. And even though many of those names have been forgotten, the promise remains alive, because what God declares on the mountaintop echoes to the ends of the earth. Thus, what began as a journey of faith between Ur and Canaan became a complex web of peoples, cultures, and kingdoms. And now that we've grasped the magnitude of the promise made to Abraham, it's time to take a step further, to look at the lesser-known sons, to open the forgotten chest of history and investigate who were the sons of Keturah and what did they do with the legacy they inherited. When Sarah passed away, Abraham's story seemed to be nearing its end, but the Bible hides, between the lines and often overlooked genealogies, a surprising twist. After the death of his wife, Abraham took another woman, Keturah, and with her he fathered 6 more sons, 6 new names, 6 new destinies. In Birth Chronicles 1:32 we read, "And the sons of Keturah, Abraham's concubine, Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shuah." And it's here that the curtain rises on a forgotten chapter of history, a chapter that reveals how God's plan went far beyond what most traditional interpretations have dared to explore. Why are these sons so rarely mentioned? Were their descendants lost to time? Or is it that, precisely because they were forgotten, they hid within the pages of history, shaping empires from the shadows? The most well-known among them was Midian, and his lineage didn't just survive, it became central to several key moments in the biblical narrative. The Midianites appeared during Moses' journey through the desert. It was in Midian that he found refuge after killing an Egyptian. It was there he met Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, the Midianite priest. In other words, Moses, the deliverer of Israel, was shaped in the midst of a people descended from Keturah. The Midianites, in turn, developed a complex culture. They were traders, nomads, warriors. They settled in strategic regions south of Canaan and north of the Arabian Peninsula, influencing trade routes, alliances, and military conflicts. At times, they were allies of Israel. At others, fierce enemies. But what few realize is that even in conflict, they shared the same roots. They had the same ancestor, Abraham. They carried the same blood that flowed through Isaac and Ishmael. They were brothers, separated by time, by culture, by distance, but brothers nonetheless. And Midian wasn't the only one who made an impact. The other sons of Keturah also left their mark. Jokshan had two sons, Sheba and Dedan, names later associated with wealthy and influential trading kingdoms in southern Arabia. Zimran, Medan, Ishbak and Shua, though mentioned less frequently, gave rise to tribes that blended with other Semitic and Arab cultures in the region. Peoples that grew and spread, merged, and eventually faded into history, but still held within them the DNA of a divine promise. These lineages connect the Bible to archaeology. Papyri, inscriptions, and ancient records speak of peoples bearing these names or variations of them, living in regions like the Negev, the Hejaz, and even parts of Ethiopia and Sudan. The influence of Keturah's sons may have stretched from the desert to the Red Sea, from the oases to the African coast. The Bible doesn't detail their deeds, but the clues are there, waiting to be read by those with eyes to see. This lost lineage teaches us something profound. Often, we overlook the details that carry grand revelations. How many stories have we missed simply because we didn't see the value in a list of names? How many peoples carry spiritual and historical legacies that were erased over the centuries? The Bible, like a vast mosaic, hides pieces that only fall into place when we dare to investigate what has been forgotten. And the sons of Keturah are exactly that, forgotten pieces of a promise that still lives on. So when we look at the map of the Middle East and see the names of tribes, peoples, and regions, perhaps we're unknowingly observing the quiet footprints of Keturah's descendants, lineages that never stood in the spotlight but helped shape the ancient world. And while Midian is the best known, the other sons also left their marks, even if time tried to erase them. The promise made to Abraham did not fail. It simply spread. And now that we've recovered the names of these forgotten sons, it's time to turn to another branch of this great tree, the descendants of Ishmael. Because while Keturah's children spread quietly, Ishmael's children left a trail of power, conflict, and influence that changed the course of history. The image of Ishmael often comes wrapped in shadows and controversy. Son of Abraham and Hagar, the Egyptian servant, Ishmael has frequently been portrayed as a secondary character, almost disposable, eclipsed by Isaac, the son of the promise. But does that view truly do justice to the legacy Ishmael left behind? Do we really understand the impact of his lineage on the world? In Genesis 25:12-16, a surprising revelation is found. Ishmael had 12 sons, princes of powerful tribes, each with their own territory, their own people, their own story. 12, just like the 12 sons of Jacob. Coincidence? Or a deliberate divine parallel? These 12 princes didn't appear by chance. Their names are recorded as founders of tribes and regions that would later become pillars in the Arab world. Nebaioth, Kedar, Adbil, Mibsam, Mishma, Dumah, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur. Naphish and Kedemah each left descendants, and many of those names still echo in the geography and culture of the Middle East. Kedar, for instance, is tied to a powerful tribal confederation mentioned in Assyrian and Babylonian records. Timur became a significant oasis and trade hub in Arabia, and the others, they scattered, merging with other tribes, leaving traces in Bedouin traditions, Islamic records, and among peoples who still today claim direct descent from Ishmael. But why does this matter? Because understanding Ishmael's lineage is essential to understanding the modern world. His descendants laid the foundation for many Arab cultures that would later give rise to empires, including the Islamic one. The blood of Ishmael runs through the veins of historic leaders, dynasties and peoples who ruled vast territories and influenced religions, philosophies, and even modern political structures. Ishmael's legacy wasn't merely tribal, it was civilizational. Behind the rivalry between Ishmael and Isaac lies a deeper story. A story of two brothers whose lineages would represent two paths, two worlds. And contrary to popular belief, God did not reject Ishmael. In Genesis 17:20, God himself says, "As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers." Ishmael was also blessed. He was also multiplied, and his descendants proved that with remarkable achievements throughout history. In Islamic tradition, Ishmael is considered the direct ancestor of Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. While this connection is debated among scholars, it is accepted and revered by billions across the globe. This means the promise made to Abraham, that he would be the father of many nations, is also fulfilled through the rise of Islam and all the peoples it influenced. It's impossible to ignore the impact of Ishmael's lineage on the spiritual, geopolitical, and cultural shape of the planet. But there is also a more delicate side to this story. The historical conflicts between the descendants of Isaac and the descendants of Ishmael have become an open wound. The brothers' rivalry turned into wars, territorial disputes, and religious clashes that span millennia. Understanding this genealogy is, therefore, a key to understanding the present. What began as a family conflict between two sons became a turning point for all of humanity. This reality invites us to reflect. The Bible doesn't tell these stories just to record them. It reveals patterns, purposes, and consequences. The lineages that came from Abraham weren't just the result of promises. They became central players in a global narrative. And Ishmael, so often overlooked from the pulpits, was one of the pillars of that story, not as a side character, but as a patriarch. And now that we understand the magnitude of Ishmael's lineage, it's time to widen our view even further. Because Abraham's sons didn't just give rise to tribes and nations, they left grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and generations who continued to spread the legacy across the earth. The expansion of Abraham's legacy goes beyond his sons. It reaches to his grandchildren, and that's what we're going to explore next. Abraham's story doesn't end with his sons. In fact, it's through his grandchildren that his legacy begins to multiply exponentially, touching entire civilizations and spreading across territories that would shape the course of world history. Abraham's grandchildren carried the blood of the promise, but they were also the first to choose what to do with that inheritance. On one side, Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau. On the other, the grandchildren of Ishmael and the children of Keturah's descendants. A web of bloodlines forms, extends and intertwines, and within it lie the roots of modern peoples and of age-old conflicts. Jacob, the most well-known, became Israel. From his 12 sons came the 12 Israelite tribes. Their stories form the very heart of the Old Testament. But there's another grandson of Abraham that Scripture highlights, Esau. He founded the Edomite lineage, historical enemies of Israel. But before he was an adversary, Esau was a brother, a grandson of the same patriarch. and his descendants grew alongside Jacob's, forming kingdoms south of Canaan and rising as regional powers. Over time, the Edomites were conquered, assimilated, and dispersed, but their origins still point back to the same root, Abraham. Meanwhile, the grandchildren of Ishmael also thrived. While we don't have many details about each of them, historical and archaeological records reveal the impact of Arab tribes that descended from his 12 sons. These peoples settled in strategic desert regions, controlling trade routes and interacting with surrounding nations. And what about the children of Keturah? They too left descendants. The Midianites, for example, continued to develop and formed alliances with peoples like the Amalekites and the Ishmaelites. Over time, many of these tribes merged, forming ethnic and cultural conglomerates that would eventually become the foundation of empires such as the Nabateans and the pre-Islamic Arabs. Today, when examining genetic studies and historical records, many scholars suggest that these lineages didn't vanish. They simply evolved, adapted, and blended. Modern DNA testing has revealed genetic connections between ethnic groups in the Middle East and North Africa, with patterns linked to the ancient Hebrew people and Semitic tribes. Peoples from Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, Sudan, and even parts of southern Europe carried genetic markers that trace back to Abrahamic ancestry. But beyond genetics, there is culture. Languages, customs, tribal structures, and beliefs that, though transformed over the centuries, still retain common elements, echoes of a time when one promise gave rise to many nations. Abraham's legacy expanded like underground roots, invisible to the naked eye, yet sustaining trees that bloomed far from the original trunk. Trees that influenced kingdoms, shaped religions, and continue to impact history to this day. This realization changes everything. It shows us that biblical history isn't confined to the pages of a sacred book. It pulses through deserts, through cities, through the names of places, and in the faces of people who may not even know where they came from. And it invites us to understand that the Bible speaks not only of faith, but of origin, of identity, of connections that transcend both time and geography. Abraham's grandchildren didn't just carry on the promise, they spread it across the world. And now that we can see the true reach of Abraham's family legacy, from sons to grandchildren, from tribes to civilizations, it's time to examine the historical impact in depth. How did these bloodlines help build empires? How did they influence religions? And in what ways do their footprints still help explain the tensions and alliances we witness in today's headlines? The bloodlines that sprang from Abraham weren't confined to the past. His descendants crossed borders, became nations, and shaped empires. From Egypt to Assyria, from Arabia to Babylon, the influence of the generations that came from the patriarch echoed through history with surprising force. And even today, those roots continue to feed tensions, alliances, and identities. What began as a divine promise turned into a network of connections so deep they help explain much of the modern geopolitical landscape, especially in the Middle East. All it takes is to look at ancient maps and compare them to current conflicts. Peoples such as the Edomites, Midianites, Ishmaelites, and Hebrews either gave rise to or merged with tribes that, centuries later, became nations. The rivalry between the descendants of Ishmael and those of Isaac was not just a biblical account. It manifested in wars between empires, territorial disputes, and religious clashes that have spanned millennia. Today, Israel and various Arab nations, who share common ancestral roots, still live in tension, as if the echoes of Esau and Jacob still resound in the hearts of their descendants. The empires of the ancient world were also shaped by these lineages. Egypt, which had direct interactions with Abraham's descendants through Hagar and later through the Hebrews, both influenced and was influenced by these ties. Assyria and Babylon, which conquered the tribes of Israel and Judah, had direct connections to regions occupied by the descendants of Keturah and Ishmael. Even the Persian Empire, which would eventually free the Jews from captivity, emerged in a context steeped in Abrahamic heritage. With the rise of Islam in the 7th century, Ishmael's lineage rose again with renewed strength. Muhammad, who claimed descent from Ishmael through Keturah, unified Arab tribes and established a spiritual and political empire that would stretch across 3 continents. In this way, the promise that Abraham would be the father of many nations entered a new chapter. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, 3 of the world's major religions, all revere Abraham as a central figure. 3 paths, 1 father, 1 beginning. These connections are not just spiritual. They influence political treaties, military decisions, educational narratives, and national identities. Leaders and peoples still define themselves as children of Abraham, whether by faith or by bloodline. And although divided by religions, languages, and flags, they share something invisible yet powerful: the same point of origin. Understanding these historical consequences is essential to seeing the world with greater clarity. The Bible is not just a record of the past. It is a map to understand the present. When we look at Abraham's descendants and their influence over the centuries, we realize that Scripture isn't only about personal faith. It speaks of nations, collective destinies, and cycles that repeat. And that's precisely why we must ask, are we still ignoring the power of these connections? Do we truly grasp the weight these lineages carry in shaping the world as we know it? History shows us that it's not enough to know the name Abraham. We must understand the depth of what came from him, because God's promises don't stay in the past. They remain alive and they continue to shape the future. The journey that began with a single man, called to leave his land without knowing where he was going, turned out to be far more than a simple walk of faith. Abraham wasn't just the ancestor of one nation. He was the root of a cosmic storyline that stretches across continents, cultures, religions, and centuries. His story isn't limited to the promises made on the plains of Canaan. It extends through the deserts of Arabia, the cities of Africa, the steppes of Asia, and the hills of the Middle East, where to this day his descendants fight, love, pray, and live as characters in a promise still unfolding. In this video, we unearthed forgotten bloodline. We gave voice to names long ignored. We showed that the sons of Keturah, the princes of Ishmael, the scattered grandchildren, and the peoples formed by these descendants did not disappear. They became silent protagonists of great civilizations. They were kings, warriors, nomads, priests, merchants. They were the links in a network that shaped empires, laid deep spiritual roots, and still live on in the streets, the names, and the nations that exist today. Abraham truly was the father of many nations, and that is no poetic exaggeration. It is a historical and spiritual reality. From his blood came peoples who fought each other, who formed alliances, who drifted apart, but who, at their core, shared the same origin. One man, one promise, one God, yet different destinies, scattered like seeds in the wind, blooming in ways even Abraham himself could never have imagined. And that's exactly where the beauty of the divine plan lies. It goes beyond our vision. It plants today what we may only understand centuries from now. And now, one question remains. Are we still ignoring hidden truths in the Bible? How many times have we skipped over genealogies without noticing the secrets buried within them? How many stories could be transformed if we simply chose to look beyond the main characters? God's word is like a minefield of revelation, and often the greatest ones are in the details, in the forgotten names, in the lineages that seem insignificant. But when illuminated, they reveal the greatness of what God can do through a single promise. If this video helped you see something new, share it with someone. Don't keep this discovery to yourself. Drop a comment below and tell us which of these revelations surprised you the most. Had you ever heard of Keturah's children? Were you familiar with the princes of Ishmael? Had you considered the impact of Abraham's grandchildren on today's world? Let's create a space for reflection and learning, where biblical history connects with the real world, with depth, with truth, and with purpose. And of course, if you love diving into the hidden stories of the Bible, discovering forgotten characters, and understanding how the past shapes the present, subscribe to the channel right now and don't miss the upcoming stories. Like this video so that more people can find it, hit the notification bell to receive new content, and share this journey with those who value a faith rooted in depth and revelation. Because in the end, this isn't just the story of Abraham, it's the story of the world. It's our story, and the most astonishing part of all is that it's still being written.